Dear learners, now after we have seen the demand planning KPIs, let's move to the supply planning KPIs. In this particular session, we are recommending around 6 major KPIs that should be minimum tracked in the business. You may have more KPIs, that is always better based on your business nature, but what we feel at least these 6 KPIs should be in your tracking list. Now, what happens in supply planning is, once we get the demand numbers from step 2, the supply planning team checks whether the capacity of the production and also the capacity of suppliers is able to meet our demands. Now, in this particular step, if we come across capacity constraints, like if the logistics capabilities are as per requirement, or if the inventory is not available as per the demand plans, then the main purpose of this step is to align the supply plans to meet the demand plans by adjusting the available capacity. Now let's move to the key performance indicators of the step 3. The first key performance indicator is on-time delivery percentage. Now, since we are talking about supply planning key performance indicators here, the on-time delivery percent we are checking here are basically a supplier-side performance. Okay, so what happens here? The formula talks about the total quantity shipped in time divided by total quantity ordered into 100%. These are orders sent to the supplier. Okay, and this KPI basically measures how reliable is our supplier's performance. It is not customer-side KPI here, but it is basically, so this KPI basically measures how reliable orders are delivered on or before the promised date from our suppliers. The higher the on-time delivery percentage, it tells that we have a better business situation. Now, let's take some assumptions. Okay, so the first assumption is we ordered total quantity on supplier to ship on 10th of January 2022 was 340 quantity. Okay, so we had ordered 340 quantity on supplier, and we expected that supplier will ship this on 10th of January 2022. But out of this 340 quantity, if supplier was able to only ship 320 quantity on or before 10th of January 2022, so when we put this particular information in our formula, then it tells us that the supplier's on-time delivery is 94.1%. More the delivery percentage, better is the performance of the supplier. Now, the same calculation happens on the customer side as well. Here, customer side means when we deliver our products to our customer. In customer side on-time delivery percentage, we actually look for the customer's order information and how we have delivered against our customer orders. And since that is also talking about how better we are delivering to our customers, and that's why these two KPIs, like on-time delivery and on-time in full, these KPIs are basically for measuring supplier performance as well as our own performance against our customer. But we measure our customer side performance usually in step 5. The next key performance indicator is on-time in full percentage. Now, in above key performance indicator, that is on-time delivery, we measured quantity delivered on time. Okay, but in this particular KPI, that is on-time in full, we actually measure total number of order lines that are delivered in full by our supplier. So, for an example, let's say we had ordered 340 quantity on supplier, but supplier delivered only 320 quantity. So what happened here is we got on-time delivery of 94%. Okay, so we got on-time delivery of 94%. But let's assume that in those 340 order quantity, there were only 25 order lines, okay, that were ordered on supplier. But out of these 25 order lines, the supplier was only able to deliver only 22 order lines in full in a given time. That means the on-time in full is only 88%. Okay, and whatever 3 order lines supplier was not able to deliver in full are actually considering 0 on-time in full percentage for those 3 lines. And that's the major difference between on-time delivery and on-time in full. So the formula here is order lines shipped in full divided by total order lines within the time. Okay, now this KPI measures how many order lines were delivered both on time and with the complete quantity ordered. Now, high the on-time in full percent, better is the performance of our suppliers. The third key performance indicator is capacity utilization percentage. Now, since supply planning team deals with fulfilling the demand by considering the capacity constraints, in reality, companies may have more capacity, but they may not have more demand. And in that particular situation, capacity utilization will remain on lower side. But on other side, companies may have low capacity, but they have huge demand. In that particular situation, companies are utilizing their utmost capacity to fulfill customer demands. And that is why capacity utilization is very important to calculate, since businesses must keep right capacity available to meet customer demands. The formula for capacity utilization is nothing but used capacity divided by available capacity into 100%. So this is actually captured in the percentage. Now, what it tells about efficiency of manufacturing or supply resources. Now, in this particular example, we have only considered the capacity of resources, but we can also calculate the capacity of the manufacturing equipments or machines that are used in the production environment. So let's assume that we have 20 laborers in our production facility, and each labor is working for 8 hours in a day. Now, let's assume that we had 21 working days in the January 2022 month, and hence our total capacity was around 3,360 hours. This comes when we multiply 20 labors into 8 hours a day into 21 days. Now, let's assume that we could only use the labor capacity of around 3,200 hours throughout the month. This may be because our demand, was less in that particular month. Now, when we put these numbers in our formula, then it tells us that the capacity utilization is only 95.2%. For a better business planning, having more capacity utilization represents better condition of business. So simply, this metric tells about the efficiency of our supply planning resources. Now, there are multiple other formulas also. You can also refer overall equipment efficiency metric as one more formula to understand capacity-related calculations for the equipment or manufacturing machine's capacity. The next formula is inventory turns. The inventory turns is nothing but how fast our average inventory is converted into the sales, and it is always better to convert the average inventory into sales as fast as possible. Let's take a simple example. Let's assume if you are a shop owner selling laptops and you get 5 laptops every day in your shop and you sell those 5 laptops every day, that means your average inventory is getting sold very fast. But let's take an example, you are getting 5 laptops every day, but you are selling only 2 or 3 laptops each day. That means your inventory is not getting sold very fast, or it is not converting into the sales very soon, and that is not good practice into the business. So to understand this particular metric, the formula is cost of goods sold divided by average inventory. Now, this is again technical topic to understand about what is cost of goods sold, but let's simplify this. In our next sheet, we have shown here different costs that are accumulated to calculate cost of goods sold. So let's take an example for a laptop business. The first cost is the raw material cost. That is nothing but whatever we purchased from suppliers, like CPU, RAM, or hard disks. Let's say the cost is $17,000. Then next cost is direct manufacturing labor, or simply the labor cost, which is around $6,800 in our example. Then factory overhead. Factory overhead is nothing but the rent or basically depreciations of machines and all the equipments that we are using, and that is considered into factory overheads. So let's assume that the $7,200 is a factory overhead. Then product packaging cost is the next one. Let's consider $960 is the packaging cost. Certainly, whatever is inbound freight and import duty is also considered into cost of goods sold. Let's assume it as $1,410. Then the next cost is purchase cost of finished goods. So this is basically useful when there is a trading business which buy and sell finished goods without any further treatments on them. That's why this is the cost specific to the trading business. Now, in our case, let's assume that this is zero, as we assumed ourselves as manufacturers of laptop. Finally, the inspection of products at factory. So let's assume 630 quantity is the inspection cost, and when we sum all these costs, our cost of goods sold is $34,000. Now, on the right side, you will understand what are the different costs that are not part of cost of goods sold. So certain costs like advertising and promotion, salaries of sales team, then outbound logistics and delivery cost to customers is also not part of cost of goods sold. Certainly, warehousing and storage costs are also not part of cost of goods sold. Then research and development cost, admin cost, HR cost, finance cost, and also interest and different taxes are also not part of cost of goods sold.
Now, let's come to the formula. So, cost of goods sold, in our case, was $34,000. The second important metric is average inventory to calculate inventory turnover. So, average inventory is nothing but the inventory that is at the beginning of the calculation period and at the end of that particular period. So we take the inventory value on those particular 2 days, and since these are only 2 days or 2 different points on which we are calculating inventory, we are dividing that by 2 since this is an average calculation. So let's assume the beginning inventory was around $11,000, and at the end of month, the inventory was $9,600 that remained available in our factory. Then our average inventory is nothing but the sum of these 2 divided by 2 numbers and dividing them by 2. That's why the average inventory is $10,300 in our example. Now, when we put these particular numbers in our formula, then it tells us that the inventory turns is 3.3. Now, it is basically telling us that the average inventory is sold 3 times in that particular month. So that means the average inventory of $10,300 is actually sold for 3 times, or it is converting into sales for 3 times in that particular period. So in this particular period, that means January 2022, if we are converting average inventory into sales, then we are selling it for 3.3 times. So having high inventory turnover ratio is basically good for the business, as it represents how fast inventory is getting converted into sales. Now let's move to the next formula, that is days of sales. Sometimes it is also called as days of inventory. Now, in days of sales calculation, the formula is average inventory divided by average daily demand. Okay, so let's assume that average inventory is already calculated in our above formula, that is $10,300. Okay, and our daily average demand, let's assume that every day, on an average, the inventory that we are using for production is $1,150. Okay, and how this average daily demand comes, it actually comes based on our past data. We are just averaging out how many inventories are used in particular period and then calculating the average daily usage. Now, when we put that numbers in our formula, then it tells us that the value is 9. So what this 9 is, this 9 tells us that whatever inventory we have in our hand is basically serving our future demand of next 9 days. Okay, now ideally, lower days of sales is always better, but it is also important to keep the healthy on-hand inventory to meet our customer demands or spike demands that come into the business. So we cannot tell exactly how much days of inventory is right, since this number usually depends on business nature and varies business to business. And that's why this should be a good target of the particular company that they should take, like how much days of sales they should be allowing into the business. The last key performance indicator is supply plan adherence percentage. Now, since we are always striving our best to meet our demand numbers, and supply team plays major role to meet the supply, so in the supply planning step, that is our step 3, one supply plan number is defined to meet. This number is simply how much production we should be making to meet our demands. So for an example, if we are forecasting that 1,000 will be the quantity that will be produced to meet our demand, but in an actual, if we could not produce 1,000 quantity, and let's say if we are only able to produce 900 quantity, and that is basically a gap, and that gap is measured in the supply plan adherence percentage. So the formula here is actual output divided by planned output into 100%, and this is actually measured into the percentage. Now, what this tells, it tells about discipline in executing the supply plans. Now, let's assume that the planned production quantity for January 2022 is 3,200 units, but the actual production happened is only 3,100 units. Now, when we put these numbers in our formula, it tells us that the supply plan adherence is 97%. That means we could adhere to 97% of our supply plan. In a business context, having high number is always better to represent better planning. That's all about supply planning, but there are still multiple metrics that companies measure in this step. But as far as our recommendation is concerned, we must have these 6 different metrics in your tracking sheet and should be tracked every month to understand your business performance. Thank you and stay tuned for the next sessions.